We don't have the puzzle of the actual result. You know, a puzzle has a picture on the front, and even a kid can take the pieces and build towards it. That's what we're doing, but without the puzzle. We don't have the picture of it. So we all get the same pieces thrown in front of us for a DFS week. We all have to go build a puzzle, and we don't know what it looks like until the end. The answer sheet's flipped over on Sunday night, and someone who has the puzzle the fastest with the same pieces as everybody else won $1 million. But
Mayo experience.
Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Mayo experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog Fantasy. Today we're walking through DFS strategy, specifically for DraftKings, and how to get yourself ready and win some money on NFL this season, or at least try not to lose as much money as possible. Tyler Tamboline at Toe Tag and Tambo from ShipItNation.com in studio with me right now. I'd say tip number one, go sub to ShipItNation.com. Use code Mayo.
And we're a site that's fully focused on DFS, providing the most affordable tools as well as the most affordable content. So check it out. College football comes included with the football package, including NFL.
Yeah, and that college football package is probably more money than your NFL/college football combined in most places.
It is. That is correct. Yeah. So it's good time to buy in now. You can get an all access package if you want the other sports, but really focused on football. Excited to get back here with you and start talking about it today.
Yeah, tons of content, tons of strategy over at ShipItNation.com. You can use the link down in the description right now. Additionally, if you just want the tools, optimizer, simulation, projections, prop snipers, and where the best numbers are going to be on sportsbooks for those projections, for the player props, especially on Underdog as well, go to runthesims.com right now. Use code Mayo. Get yourself in there. Get acclimated with the tools, and you'll be on your way. So let's get this started of where people should start in terms of winning money this year. Like I said, try not to lose all your money, especially right away, because that is absolutely no fun. So I think it's probably good to establish what bankrolls are for people. So when you consider your bankroll, you play somewhere in the neighborhood of like $5,000 per slate on the NFL season. I play anywhere between, let's say, 400 and 700, depending on how frisky I want to get that week. But if someone comes into the season and be like, hey, I have $100, do we think that's $100 a week? Do we think that's $100 for the season? Like, I think that people need to be honest with themselves about that. Because if you say like, oh, I have $100 per season, but you just deposit $100 every single week, well, your bankroll is actually much bigger than what you thought.
For sure. And that's why it does come back to having a starting point, having a plan. You know, people always say, trust the process or figure out this. If you don't have one, you won't know where to start. And bankroll management is the key. Contest selection keeps you sustainable. You can go and play through some of these losses because we know there's going to be losses along the way, but you do have to have a plan. If you're going to attack qualifiers for the year and you say, oh, I really like this to be the year I get to King of the Desert, or I want to get to the Fantasy Football World Championship. Well, look ahead, know what that looks like. Do your 18-week calculation plus. Don't forget about showdown slates, which I'm sure we'll get to, things like that, where you're applying a lot more. If I play 5,000 on a Sunday, or 1,500 on a showdown slate, that's okay for me, but for everybody else, it's a little bit different. So you do have to know what your money situation is, what you're capable of losing, and then hope to go find some wins along the way.
And I think you need to establish your goals right
100%.
away as well. Like, are you playing for $1 million every single week in the Millionaire Maker? Are you trying to win big monies in giant tournaments where you enter $3 and try to win $100,000? I would recommend against both those things, because I found sustainability the past few years once we started doing this show together, and we're doing it every week, every Friday on the Pat Mayo Experience and on Mayo Media. So please go sub to that right now. And if you want to get super frisky with it, the audio podcasts come out as well on Apple and Spotify. If you subscribe, rate, and review 5 stars right now, I'm giving away $500 to one lucky person who does that. So please go do that right now and get yourself in that draw. But I've really shrunk down. Like, I used to play like 50 lineups a week, and like we'll build lineups on the show and throw them in the $5. Like, that's kind of whatever. I don't really, that's a part of the show.
It's a bit. We're trying to hit that thing.
Yeah, we're throwing to hit that thing, but we're also showing you how to build through different lineups, and we're playing them as the show goes along. I don't even play in the 20 maxes anymore. I play in the $150 3 max every single week. I qualified for King of the Beach last year.
Yep.
Didn't get to the finals like you, but I almost got there. I missed by like 2 points. It was very devastating to me. But so I probably allocate like $50 to $100 every single week for the qualifiers. I'll play in the $100 single entry. And that's really where I'm at now. I play like 5 main lineups per week and spread them across different contests with different stacks that I like to do. But that's how I've found sustainability, that especially in the 150, you get like 2 or 3 decent cashes throughout the course of the season. You've already won all your money for the year.
Yeah, and I think you said it best. Like again, whatever most people are playing with a smaller bankroll, and that's okay. But if it's $100 a week, you can get in on the $20 three max or the $5 three max, and then spread it out to some other ones. But I do think you said the key, and we have a full 4-hour course at Ship It Nation. So I'm going to pull a tidbit from that one because I think it's a big one. To your point, and we called it the secret of satellites. And basically, what it's saying is you don't know. You're hoping you're going to have a bunch of big weeks when you play any type of DFS sport. We're talking NFL. So you have X amount of time, 18 weeks, call it whatever with the regular season, to try and find that big week. But what you do is you don't have to go all in. Some people are like, well, I'm going to try out a $200 one this week and just take a shot. But you have no idea what the result's going to be. So you are taking a shot. Why not take that $200, separate it over those weeks, play a $9 qualifier to the $888 or something each week, or the $555. And the secret of satellites is that you don't know when your big week's going to be, but at least when it does hit, or if it does hit, that turns into a ticket that, while you do have to go into round 2, almost like to the King of the Beach perspective, you now won that ticket. You're playing with the house money, and you also have a strategy for playing a single lineup in a satellite that goes on to win because you just did it. So the secret is play them, don't buy into them, and then when you have it, you're able to understand how to play them because that's how you got it in the first place.
And the main reason that I say that you need to establish what your goals are going to be, and especially with the tournament selection, because I think it really does, before we get into how you actually build your lineups, I think that's really the key determining factor. Like if I'm playing in a $100 double up or a $50 double up, my strategy is going to be way different than if I'm trying to qualify through a satellite or try to win a $150 tournament. That's only 3 max. It has 700 people in it. That strategy is a lot different than, hey, I'm going to play this $3 lineup against 170,000 people where I need to go completely off the board and swing away, and hopefully I end up with the big lotto ticket of the week. I feel like the smaller contest size that you play doesn't need to be dollar amount or monetary funds. Like you can play in a $5 that has 6,000 people in it versus a $5 that has 150,000 people in it. Well, the top prize in the $6,000 or 6,000 person one is a lot smaller. You actually have a chance to win that one, it feels like.
Yeah, that's a huge factor of it. Obviously, I think no matter what, if you want to take one rule away, is if you have a smaller bankroll, as we know most do, and that's great, that's how you get things started, is to play in the highest dollar, smaller field that you can. I'm saying, not saying go up to like the 2K. I'm talking within your range. If it's a $5 single entry with 1,000 people, just be okay that it only pays this, but stay in something with a good prize structure, something you can build on. Get into those satellites to take your shots for the bigger prizes. Don't go jumping into something like that. And then the other part you talked about with the goals is also mindset. It's funny how this works, but like you said, if your goal is to just make money and play cash games and double up every week, then your mindset, it should not be, where's that 100K at? Because you're not playing for it, number one. Number two, you probably need the chalk to go off because you're playing a bunch of chalk in those lineups. On the flip side of that, Pat, is if your goal is to win these tournaments, these larger fields, maybe for a smaller buy, $5 with 50K or 100K up top, you probably actually need, mindset-wise, you need the chalk to bust, and you have to be okay that when it goes off, knowing that you took your shot to get ahead of the others that were in that because you need leverage.
The other thing you can do if you want to sustain your bankroll throughout the course of football season is take advantage of bonuses, prizes, wherever they might come up. So whether it's crowns on DraftKings, or I have a Pick'em League on Underdog this year. All you need to do is have an Underdog account. So if you don't have one, use code Mayo right now. Here's the fun thing. Use code Mayo. You don't have an Underdog account, you get a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. It's a free $1,000 that you can have right off the hop. That's guaranteed money as long as you hit the deposit bonus qualification. Do that with code Mayo. There's also free squares that come up throughout the course of the week on Underdog. So like for week 1 for Thursday Night Football, there is a Travis Kelce free square. It's like over half a catch. So if he gets one catch, you win. So you might want to go do that. And if you hit the description right now, I have the league. So with the league, it's a Pick'em League. There's weekly prizes and there's a yearly prize, but it's all on top of what you're doing already. And there's $25,000 worth of extra money as a part of that. All you need to do is fill out the Google form, enter your email, enter your Underdog account, and you are qualified for it. For the weekly, you need to make 10 picks per week, no scorchers or anything like that, just the typical higher or lower. And then you qualify for the weekly prizes where it's $500 to the winner, an extra $500 on top of what you might win with your entry anyway. And you can play a $1 entry, you can play a $20 entry, you can play a $500 entry. It doesn't matter. It's percentage of ones that you get right in your entry on Underdog. And for the season long, you have to make 180 picks throughout the course of the season. You can make 6,000 picks if you want to, but you need a minimum of 180. So I do think that there's going to be some gamesmanship of guys that are close to the 180 and they have a really high percentage, they might just like lock it in.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop. There's $5,000 at the very top of that for first place. For the season longs, $3,000 for second. Top 10 gets paid. And again, you get paid along the way if you win your entries.
Yeah, it's just another way of the game's evolving and different things that you can do. So people love these contests. We've seen it with one and dones. We've seen it in the past with NFL, with survivors, things like that. It's just another type of access you can get to it through betting.
100%. And this is just extra money on top of what you could be winning anyway. So I think you should always be promo hunting. You should always take advantage of these things. I always find it funny at sports books when they're basically they don't win every single time, obviously. Yeah. Like if Kelsey could get hurt on the first play, although they probably refund you on that.
They are going to, because usually they do like a quarterback where it's going to be automatic, like over half passing yards for Patrick Mahomes. This is actually the funny one because Kelsey started his last season pretty slowly and then started turning it on in the playoffs. What if he starts slow again, Pat? No catch, imagine.
That'd be bad. They'd probably give you your money back.
I think they would.
On that one, since it was a promo. But just attack these promos. Like they're giving you money to play with. Well, and here's the sneaky thing. Like you said, win or lose, try to have a sustainable bankroll on DraftKings. I think the same thing happens with betting as well. You're not going to win every single week. You need to be okay with losing because it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And
But that's a mindset. That's what I was saying.
But everyone knows that, yet no one seems to say it.
Yeah, I think I don't know if everyone knows that. I think that's the key factor, what we're trying to explain to people here with DFS betting, whatever it is you're doing. If it's money you can afford to lose, it really shouldn't affect you that much. I get it. People hate to lose more than they like to win. They think they're supposed to win, but you're not. It's just nobody does. That's not how it works. So you have to have this mindset, and that can really change things up. In betting, it happens all the time. It's just as easy to click another game or another prop bet or whatever it is and go chase that loss. It's the same in DFS. You can play within your bankroll for 2 weeks, get pissed off, and then week 3, you're jamming in $500. You're like, I'm going to get all that back and more. Why? You didn't win the first 2 weeks. Why is it guaranteed you're going to win in week 3? And that's why the secret of satellites, like I said earlier, can apply to anything. Just how you play in general is you don't know when you're going to hit. So you don't have to change it up. No different than when you win, when you finally get your big win, whether it's 1,000, 5,000, 10,000.
Don't press.
Don't go jam it all back in because you're a hero. You finally hit it. Now you have the opportunity to stress a little less, continue to play more DFS, and find your success. Here's a little rhymer for you there, but just throw it all out there. I think that's true. You've talked about it in the past yourself, where you hit 10 grand and then decide to pile a bunch back in the next week and then learn from those mistakes. I did the same. Lots of people have done that. Don't do that.
No, and there's people that consistently do it over and over, like really good players who have $0 to their name now.
It happens all the time. We see a lot of people that have been at the top of the leaderboards and completely disappear. And that's because they win the big money. Most people paying their taxes have to go do that, and they may forget about that or save it for whatever. And then on top of it, they just you start seeing them in tournaments you never saw them in before. They're in the 5K. They show a screenshot of, I was so close on this one, but then they've shown the proof because they're in for like 13K on this slate. You go back to their winning screenshot, it was from $1,000 or $1,300. The point is, you don't need to jam more money to make more money. That's not always the case.
Yeah, I always go in with the mindset that I'm probably going to lose. Anything that I win just feels like a big bonus for me. And changing my mindset to that has allowed me to win way more.
Yeah. Do you ever know the casino analogy? You ever go back in the day, casino, like you don't bring your cards with you. You just bring your $300 or $400 in your pocket. And you know, I'm probably going to lose it. But if I win anything, it's awesome. But if I lose it all, I can't go to the ATM or go find more money. That's kind of the setup you have to do with this. You don't want to just jump back into the next thing and jam a bunch more money and have your card on file, so to speak. You want to just be able to say, if I lose it, and I move on to next week. That's how it goes.
Well, the way you can do it here is you can become a winner on Underdog. Code Mayo to go sign up right now and hit the description for that Google form link. Like I said, you just go enter the contest. Theoretically, you could spend $180 for the year and win $5,000.
Yeah, it's not bad. Good ROI.
Yeah, and if you win the $5,000 off the 180, you are winning along the way as well because obviously you have winning picks.
Yeah, that's so critical. And I think that's another piece, just to close out their previous section, was that you have to be comfortable with what you're winning. So too many people are looking at someone winning 100 grand, not realizing that they might be in for 100 grand this year in play. So that 100 grand is kind of necessary. Or this person won 2 milli makers. Yeah, I talk to them. I go to these live finals. I'm with them. Like, literally, I need to win those 2 milli makers based on my year. It's not hard to go figure out and look at my buy-ins and see where I'm at. So just don't be shaming yourself for turning 180 into 5,000. I know it sounds crazy, but too many people do. They're like, well, I wish I won that 100K, though. You didn't play to win the 100K. You played to win the 5K. That's awesome.
That is the big thing. And I've never suffered from that FOMO, but I know that people have. People seem to suffer from that FOMO from me because I hit a big one in golf this year. They're like, well, if you would just play that in the bigger tournament, you would have won 20,000 instead of 5,000. Like, well, I didn't play in the 20,000 one. How could I wasn't going to play in it.
Yeah.
Why would I be upset that I didn't win it? But people do get that mindset. Well, this one that I played in the $3, if I had just played that in the $500, I would have won $2 million. It's like, well,
People just beat themselves up.
You were
yeah.
never, just be happy that you won.
It's funny. People have their biggest score ever. What's crazy, like $100 into 5,000. Monumental, and they're pumped, but then their next thing they say or go to right away is, well, damn, I wish I had played that in this tournament, would have paid $100K. But you didn't, and you literally came first place in the one you chose to play, and you won. You achieved it. Now, move on to the next one and go find success again. It's the same as I always say, nobody cares, work harder. It's not only when you lose, it's when you win too. Whether you win the $1 million on Sunday or you lose all your money, you're going back to work on Monday and you're playing it again, at least for me. So it's the same thing you have to have. If you're going to go back and play the next slate anyway, just move on from that one, be happy with what happened or be accepting of what happened and go to the next slate.
Again, that's all about setting your goals of what you want to do. Like, I'm not playing for $1 million. Just not.
Got it. So you're not going to win it, but you're not going to be mad when you
No.
don't win it because you've accepted it.
Yeah, I try to play like that 150 max. It's my favorite tournament. The 3 max, I play it like a single entry. I just play the one lineup into it. I don't play the 3. But there's different sizes of it. I think there's one that has like 2,000. There's one that has 1,000. I think there's one that has like 600. I think the 600 one, pays a pretty hefty top prize.
Yeah.
And
It's what you're comfortable with. I don't know how deep you delve into it. Like, obviously, I play professionally, so
Yeah.
it's a little bit different. But
and I don't. I play for fun, but I do want to win, obviously.
For sure. And you've still established goals. But I was just going to say to somebody, I think this can apply to anybody. I mean, like that, even if you're just playing lower stakes or you're setting up for the season, you can calculate out sort of your buy-ins. I'll talk more on that in 1 second. I have an iPhone Note with my goals for the year. Again, I play professionally. It's like a professional golfer has goals for the season, whatever that might be. I have goals that I check in on. I have things that I'm looking to go towards and all that. And I think it's just part of the journey that I'm on, right? It's not necessarily win $1 million. The win the Millie Maker is like a BHAG, a big, huge, aggressive goal or whatever people call it. If I want it, great. I'd rather get it kind of through like a live final, win the Fantasy Football World Championship for $2 million or something for the glory, the trophy, and then you just get the money with it. But I also will say this, Pat, when we talked earlier on Bankroll and stuff like that, I was going to go to that point quick, is also remember, I would not set your season up as I have $1,800. I can only play $100 a week, because there is weeks where you may feel you have a bigger edge. You feel more comfortable with it. You're good with what you've built. You're like, man, I wish I had more line. You can't just hold yourself hostage to that. And then it goes the other way. If there's a week you don't feel as comfortable, or you've got a wedding or something like that, and you know you're not going to be as involved, just count that money as you can use it in the future when you feel a bigger edge and go less on that week as well. You don't just have to say $100 a week in, whatever happens. You can do it your own way.
You have made the Fantasy Football World Championships on DraftKings how many years in a row now?
Fantasy Football World Championship's the hardest one to get into. So I've actually only made that one once, but I made King of the Beach.
But you made it last year, didn't you?
I made it the year before last year.
Right.
Yeah, New Orleans. But King of the Beach was last year. I had pretty good success across the board. I think they're actually discontinuing it. I think it's just going to be King of the Desert now.
Oh.
And King of the Beach, I've had 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and some other good finishes. So, just along the way. And then King of the Desert last year, the first year, I ended up coming in 19th, and you needed to make top 15 to get there. So I think that's what people need to understand as well. It's like, even though I've got to these things, had some success at some of them, there's years I don't make them at all. Or there's times where I miss out by a hair. You talked about it with your King of the Beach. You just missed it. We've had the same thing happen. I got to the golf live final just recently, and I had a terrible result, 43rd out of 50. Like but I made it. It's so hard to even make it. So that's kind of part of the journey, like we keep talking about, but it is something you have to keep in mind.
And would you say that when it comes to your process, would you say that you're the most equipped data person in the world?
Oh, definitely not.
Would you say that you know the most about football of anyone who plays?
Very, very little. I never put pads on in my life.
Then what makes you successful at this? Is it understanding the actual game that you're playing?
Yes, and that's what we focus on at Ship It Nation. It's about the game within the game. I mean, DraftKings uses that, but just to say it, it is true. People forget so often that it's a game of DFS. That's why somebody can go win. They're like, how does he know NASCAR too? How does he know baseball too? He doesn't.
I won an F1 GPP this year.
Right.
I know one driver.
Right. It's DFS. You're playing daily fantasy sports. You're not playing football. I don't have to put on a helmet and get on the field and put on shoulder pads and do anything. And I never had to do that because I have to know how to win at DFS. Game theory, correlation, leverage, everything we do. It's not picks and plays. It's process. We're focused on winning the DFS tournament, not who's going to win games. That's a product. The results oriented is when you put your process in and build to win a tournament in DFS, there will be results at the end. It will be because Dak Prescott threw 3 touchdowns to CeeDee Lamb. Yes. but it wasn't the picks that necessarily got me there. They're what ended up on the winning lineup that we built towards beating the field we were playing.
So you brought up a whole bunch of different things there, being the process, leverage. Let's talk through a few of those things to get people up to speed on what you mean by that, especially if they're coming in for the first time or if they're people who've been watching for ages who hear these concepts but don't really understand how to apply them. So let's just sit there with a blank slate, a blank lineup right now. How do you start to approach your week?
Yeah, typically what it's going to be is looking at what the games are, what the totals are, what the spreads are, DraftKings pricing when it comes out, sort of starting to see what these, what you could fit. What are some of the stacks that they look like? Is someone completely mispriced? Is there some breakdown in that or, edge that you can exploit that way? Look for it possibly, but really what it comes down to is going to be later in the week. And that's, I put out a full slate plan where I'm actually just giving thoughts and, lots of players read it. And I put out tidbits and things like that too, where people can focus in on what are some of the thoughts around the plays. But my focus is on putting them together. What is the puzzle that we're building here? And what you want to look at first is what the puzzle the general public is doing. This is what you and I do on Fridays. Okay, what is the lineup that most people are starting with and building away from? And what pieces get left behind in all kinds of these lineups? The same running backs they're using. So even when they change their stacks, they're still heavy on Bijan Robinson or something because he looks like the guy this week. So when you can see that, this is what I always say, we don't have the puzzle of the actual result. A puzzle has a picture on the front, and even a kid can take the pieces and build towards it. That's what we're doing, but without the puzzle. We don't have the picture of it. So we all get the same pieces thrown in front of us for a DFS week. We all have to go build a puzzle, and we don't know what it looks like until the end. The answer sheet's flipped over on Sunday night, and someone who has the puzzle the fastest with the same pieces as everybody else won $1 million. But what we do have going into the week is what the puzzle we think people are building. And then we could say, we don't think it's that puzzle, so let's build this way. Or I think they got some right, but I have a fix that's going to make it a little bit different. And in this case, we're looking for that leverage against it. If they're going, we can get more into it in a second, but I'd say leverage against it. What type of correlation would that look like versus what I can do instead? And then is there anything to exploit there that I think that, they're making a bad decision, or in this analogy, they built the puzzle wrong? I think the top left-hand side is wrong in this example.
What do you mean when you say leverage?
So here's an example. I mean, there's multiple different ways to do it, but like if you see that everybody is on 2 high-end running backs this week, you have to fill 2 RB slots on your lineup, and you see they're doing that, one way I might leverage that is I'll do it through roster construction. I'll leverage the high 2 running back lineup where I think that forces them into a cheap stack now that they're building out.
Or cheap receivers,
cheap
tight end.
receivers, whatever it might be that makes sense. And I can look for different angles against that. So I can say, okay, I like these 2 mid-tier running backs, and now I can get the more expensive stack that I think could find 3-4 touchdowns, and I'm not risking as much on my wide receiver 2 or 3 on this team where I'm overstacking it or something. So I'm just looking against what the field is doing and finding ways I can leverage against that. The other way would obviously be to make a pivot and sort of leverage what everybody thinks is going to happen. Well, Jamar Chase just has to be the guy this week. T. Higgins sucks. That's okay. The ownership says that people love Jamar Chase this week. One way I can do it is I can move off Jamar Chase, go to T. Higgins, get those points that way, and then on top of it, free up more money for something else. And that would be an example of how you can put it all together, Pat, and how there's levels to it. Everyone thinks it's Jamar Chase. By the end of the week, more people have moved to T. Higgins and got a little bit of a boost for money in their lineup, but I'm going to stack it one more feature, and I'm going to go to Tyler Boyd, who everybody thinks sucks, and that's fine, but I also now get from your 5K running back that you have to have with those 2 other wide receivers, I'm now going to get a guy that is 7,800 or something. I'm getting a serious dude that's in a really good spot that you can't fit into those builds, or you haven't got to in many of those builds.
It's funny, on Cincinnati this year with Boyd in Tennessee, it's going to be like, yes, smash, that guy.
It'd be totally different. I use this example all the time too, DK Metcalf. What ends up happening, he's the guy because he's big, fast, strong. Then it was always people go to Lockett, but he's fast. He can get out there. It could be him, great, but then it's JSN.
Or the answer is just Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, it could be that as well. That's another way to do it. Exactly. If everybody's on a stack, that's a great example. If everybody's on this stack this week and they're going through different levels of that, you can go on the running game instead, right? You're saying if everyone thinks it's going to be this stack, I'm going to move off that stack. I still think they're going to score the points, but let me play the running back. And when he jams in 2 touchdowns and 100 yards on the ground that kills out the clock, those stacks are dead. The running back crushes. That's another prime example. Same thing. Defenses against stuff that's going to happen. You know, if you're not playing Lamar Jackson this week and everybody is, I could play the defense against Baltimore, and maybe that's a way to make it happen. And we talk more about that as the season goes on, but different ways where, you know, with defense, it's not going to be, just the points. We're not looking for shutouts as much as we're looking for turnovers.
Let's talk about that right now, because I think that one of the few unexploited edges left in building DraftKings lineups is actually defenses, because people just want, like you said, and good players know this, but I feel like most casual players or people who aren't really paying attention, that it's not that you can't pay up for defense. I don't really care about that. But there's very few times that I would probably take a very popular defense, especially an expensive popular defense. It's like the very clear bottom rung defense. It's $2,400 because midway through the week, all of a sudden they're playing Nathan Peterman and not Josh Allen or something like that. You'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll just put that in. That's fine. I'll eat that ownership because the price is right for me. But overall, like, I would almost set a hard limit of what I want to pay for a defense. Like, set it at 3,000. I'm just looking below because I don't care if a team gets a shutout. Generally speaking, that doesn't happen. Very few teams shut teams out. And a lot of what you want to see is you want plays to be run against. When you're looking at a defense, you want to be picking a defense that's going to face a lot of pass attempts, because pass attempts are where fantasy points are born. You have sacks, you have interceptions, you have sack fumbles, pick sixes, return sixes. Just the more pressure you can put on a quarterback when they are passing, the more fantasy points you are going to score as a fantasy defense. You can give up 24 points. Who cares? You could end up with 7 sacks and 2 pick sixes or whatever it is. Those where the slate-breaking defenses come from. And you probably don't want the world's worst one. I always just try to look at adjusted sack rate versus from the defensive line or a defense versus the adjusted sack rate of the offensive line, and then try to put in how many pass attempts I think they're going to have per game, and then just go it out from there. Pressuring the quarterback leads to fantasy points. The more times they drop back, the more pressures you can get, the more fantasy points you can score.
100%. I go back to that Mexico game that year. It was the Rams, maybe it was the Chiefs. I can't remember who they played, but it was over 100 points scored, and both defenses scored like 25 points. Even though 100 points got put up on the board, that's how many opportunities there was for pick sixes, turnovers, fumbles, and scores. All those still lead to points on the board, but they lead to defensive points as well. And on the flip side of that, we talked about this playing. Someone's like, oh, their third string quarterback's in this week. He must suck. There's no way he's going to get crushed. I got to just play this 20% defense against him. But here's the thing. The coaches know that too. That's why he's a third string. And what ends up happening is they build the game plan around making his life as easy as possible. Simple checkdowns, handoffs, all this stuff where it's not actually going to be a bunch of attempts that you get to take him down. And you say, oh, well, when he goes down in the game, a lot of the times those games become a wash. And if it's like 21-0, 24-0, whatever it might be, while that defense is getting a shutout, there could be still a running back touchdown scored. The defense on the other side, they get sloppy late, and they'll just run the clock out a bit, so there won't be as many opportunities. And even then, the shutout doesn't matter as much in that example.
In a prime example from a year ago, playing defenses against Atlanta, despite the fact they had Tyler Heineke and Desmond Ridder running at a running back, was pretty useless because all they did was run. There was just no fantasy points to be scored. There were shorter games, fewer plays, and almost 18 pass attempts a game.
Yeah.
That's not doing anything for you.
Yeah, versus the old Jameis Winston games where he would just, throw 3 touchdowns, but also 3 interceptions, and some of them would be pick sixes. So you're still racking up the points, even though he's putting 21 on the board with this team through the air, just alone.
Like, just think about the juxtaposition of Josh Allen first half of the season versus second half of the season when Joe Brady ended up coming in and they ran the ball a whole lot more. Josh Allen threw fewer picks in those games. When left to kind of freewheel, Josh Allen just might give it to you sometimes. Yeah. And you'd be like, well, I never want to stream a defense against Buffalo, but he gets sacked a ton, he fumbles a ton.
And usually that defense is cheaper.
Yeah.
Because you're going up against a monster in Josh Allen who people say, like, oh, he's so good, there's no way he can mess it up. But he was actually turning it over a ton. And I will say this, the last thing I would just say is just about, your point on the pools. Everyone says this. I agree. Obviously, playing 150 lineups, whatever. I'm just sort of capping defense because it is such a high variance position. But I don't think there's anything against, you and I do it on Fridays, saying, okay, if I was just to make a pool of the defenses, even though I'm still capping and I'm still interested in just playing, it's who am I playing, why, where does that fit into my pool. Here's the 4 that we think are going to get the most opportunities. Again, no one knows, but I'm just giving examples. Secondly, I am going to play the Arizona defense at $2,100, even though they're against Josh Allen, because in my non-Josh Allen lineups, kind of makes sense just to fit them in and let me stack points everywhere else. And I'm saying in that lineup, I don't need him. Maybe it's because he screws up and makes mistakes and the Buffalo offense does not come through and Arizona does on defense. So I don't have a problem making your own pool of it. It's just we still don't know a lot, but rather than just join forces with the 20% that think the Bengals versus a backup has to be the defense this week, I am going to look for angles in and use that as a part of my approach because usually the winning Millie Maker lineups have a pretty different defense on them.
Trying to think about week one, like who is playing New England, who is playing Carolina. I would expect those two teams to be like what you would want to stream against. So whoever's playing them are going to be favorites, so they're going to be expensive. But then you have Bryce Young and either Jacoby Brissett or Drake May. They're probably just going to hand the ball off a ton.
It's very possible. That's what I mean.
And then you get sucked into this like somewhat expensive 25% owned defense in a large tournament. Like just pivot. That's the easiest pivot I feel like you can make.
Yeah.
That, and I guess the other really easy pivot that you can make listen, this doesn't work every time. The chalk defense might smash and you're going to need them. That's going to happen 5 times a year. You're going to feel stupid for not doing it. But you're going to win more by not doing it in the weeks that it doesn't work out. It's like the really cheap wide receiver. The really cheap wide receiver that everyone is on just has such a low hit rate versus the really cheap running back that everyone is on tends to come through far more often than not.
Yeah, it's very similar in that sense. You know, it's the cheap version. And same, it goes even with the high end too. I was going to say this, but like the wide receiver one that's 9,000, 9,200 or something like that. It could still be a problem for you. Obviously, you got to pay a lot. You're expecting a lot. They get a touchdown early, and everyone's like, "Oh, we hit!" But first of all, it's just as heavily owned. Everybody has them, and also they should be doing that for that price. That's what you paid for. So you better get that and a lot more. It works out sometimes with guys like Tyreek Hill, where they get an early 60-yard touchdown, 5 more catches, another touchdown. Like, okay, I didn't have him this week or whatever. Then that's fine. But yet, like you said, the cheap wide receiver was what I was going to say is very similar to golf. Right? Where the cheap golfer, there's just so many other pivots down there that you don't necessarily need them. And if I was going to do the cheap wide receiver, I prefer to have them in my stack more than as a one-off, just because it's not doing much for you as the one-off. And maybe that stack goes off where other people are stacking it. You're going to get left behind in that case as well.
Additionally, with the cheap running back, at least their touches are predictable. At least you think that they're predictable going in. It doesn't work out every single time. I mean, how many weeks in a row did we ride Zach Moss when he was $4,100 and then he scored a touchdown every week that got called back if he just scores that touchdown?
Bijan Robinson last year, man. I know we're going to do it again this year, but remember it's this guy, it's that guy. It's like, why won't you just give this guy the ball, especially when they get in there? But it's the way it goes.
But he wasn't cheap though. I'm talking about like the min on DraftKings is going to be $4,000.
Oh, for running backs, like you said, yeah, definitely much safer to go that route
because you're like, oh, I can pencil this guy in for 16 touches at $4,100. And maybe a goal line touch or two, depending on what happens. That's usually an injury replacement after pricing comes out. We'll call it a free square. Mm-hmm. It's not really a free square, and that guy might be 65% owned. But I'm okay taking the 65% owned guy at $4,100 at running back and then using that to construct the rest of my lineup elsewhere. Whereas, let's just try to envision a situation where, for whatever reason,
I was like Hollywood Brown is out and Greg Dortch is the guy now. But is Greg Dortch really the guy?
Is he really the guy?
It's not the same as this running back you're talking about.
Wide receivers and tight ends don't operate the same way in terms of pyramid of touches that everyone else does. So running back, like, hey, running back A is hurt. Running back B is going to get 80% of that guy's workload. Therefore, we can project him for the 16 touches. CeeDee Lamb gets hurt, and then you're left with Brendan Cooks and a bunch of scrubs. Well, maybe one of them does well. You have no idea. It's not like CeeDee Lamb's 14 targets get pasted on to Jake Ferguson and Brendan Cooks and whoever else it might be. They might change their game plan.
And
they might not throw as much.
The defense knows Lamb is out also. Yeah. Like they may not throw as much. B, the defense knows Lamb is out. So what? We got to shut down Cooks down. We're good. Even if they're not going to focus heavily, but even if they do just move over there a little bit, it's not the same as this running back is out. And now this dude is going to be the one we hand the ball to 16 times today, most likely. Again, way more projectable, feels way better. And that's where you'll see people going all in a situation and get 100% of them, just lock them and say, look, if he only gets me 12 points, so be it, but I feel pretty good about 10 to 12. If I get that 18 or 17 that I'm hoping for, I'm in a really good place. Nobody's doing that with the cheap wide receiver. They're just going to maybe bump them a little bit in projection and say, oh, if I get it, I get it. And they're not going to take that huge portion of that ownership.
But you're going to see that those hugely owned $3,000, $3,400 receivers, just don't play them.
Yeah, they get to 20 to 30% because everybody wants a slice, wants a piece.
And they're so cheap, they get you Justin Jefferson and Tyreek Hill or Christian McCaffrey, whoever it might be. Yeah. Well, and then you're competing against not only a whole bunch of lineups that even if that guy hits, They're generally paired with the guy that you paid up for in all of those lineups.
Yeah, they really help us figure it out when we do our Friday show of the sort of the cash chalk plays, where you can then see where that lineup gets built from. And I understand, again, back to our goals and mindset topic off the top, that's in cash, fine. That makes everything else work. Now you get the 2 best running backs on the slate. You're trying to rack up as much as you can, but 5 huge scores by pumping in 5 big time hitters that you can score off of. And that makes it work. And they might get you 6 to 8 points. What people don't understand is that 6 to 8 points is not going to do much or usually matter in these large field tournaments. A completely different mindset. Just move off of it or overstack with it or something and try and get after it a different way, where you're saying at least if I get them right, it goes to their quarterback, because if I really get them right, you probably need the quarterback, the other receiver with them, and then you got something going on the other side or something along those lines.
Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Everyone who tunes into the Pat Mayo Experience knows from time to time I like to talk to you about some health supplements that I end up taking, and I've been doing Timeline's MitoPure now for about a month. Feel great? And I think you can too. Take 2 soft gels a day for 2 months, and you can see significant improvements in your cellular energy, your muscle strength, and your endurance. That was the big thing. I've been golfing more this summer and lifting less. Yet when I go back to the gym for my once a week, like max lift, I'm not really atrophying that much. I'm not losing a ton of muscle, which is absolutely fantastic news for me and my golf game, because if you work out too much, then you get too sore, you get too stiff, you need to retain that flexibility. I'm retaining my muscle mass at the same time, although I'm not working out as much, and it comes in 2 product designs to fit your needs. They're berry powder, which is great to mix into your breakfast, yogurt, or daily smoothie. That's how I've been doing it. I've been eating some strawberries, raspberries, blackberries with a little bit of yogurt, a little bit of protein powder, then boom, Timeline's MitoPure right on top of that. Or they have soft gels for the days where you're just on the run and wanted something convenient to grab and go. So, Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of MitoPure right now. So go to timeline.com/Mayo to get that 10% off. All right?
I think that's a good differentiation between cash game and GPP and tournament play. Now, on this show, we talk about tournaments. I don't even play cash games.
Right.
I feel like fewer and fewer people are playing cash games these days.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's just one of those things where kind of feels like everybody knows what they're doing within it. You can still have a ton of money to be made, but once you have the sort of core 5 or 6 guys and you get to where it is, it's a lot of 2v2s, 3v3s, things like that, where you're just, yeah.
And it's just a lot of people going to separate sites, hitting optimize and taking the highest projected lineup and just entering that. And then if that just happens with a bunch of people, you have like 50 guys in one tournament who have exactly the same lineup.
Or just like a very close variation to it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So then you see these trains coming through. Now, if you feel like you can get different and you only need to come in the top 45% of the cash game in order to get yourself paid. But what we're talking about is you need to have a top 1% lineup. How do you do that? Well, it's not going to be having the same lineup as everyone else.
Yeah, I really wish they would just take tournaments, balance the structures a little bit more, even if you want to keep the top heaviness of it, and take it down to like 15%. Get paid in tournaments, 18%. Poker has done a good job of changing their structures over to this. It's like if you're playing a tournament, you're not just getting that free min cash to 30%. I know why the sites do it, but it's just my take. And then maybe some of those people that aren't as comfortable or not hitting that cash line in tournaments anymore, maybe they hop back over to the cash streets, reinvigorate it a little bit over there. It's not going to happen, but just my thoughts that I always have.
Well, I worked on the payouts for this underdog pool that I'm putting together that I wanted to be, a good top prize, like $5,000, a pretty good top prize when
when you could be in for 180.
You can be in for 180. But I wanted to have like third or second is 3,000, third and fourth are both 2,000. Like I wanted to make sure that if you had, what I really don't like is if you come third in something. Like hell, even the Millie Maker. You come third in the Millie Maker, it's what, like 50K?
Well, that's you got to just play to win that, because that's why. It's like usually it's $1,000,000, 150.
Yeah. Like, that's no fun. Imagine if you had the third place lineup in a Millionaire Maker with 170,000 people and you won 50K.
It's almost worse. I mean, it's amazing. Most it's not frowning upon 50K. Obviously, I'm just saying it's true. Like I have had it before. It was 40K the year that I got it, and it was $1 million this year in golf. I just had it like 6 months ago. I got 60K for third. It was 100K for second, $1 million for first. It happens. Like I've had multiple thirds in Million Makers. It's like this is the more annoying part. But you have to know that you were just right there. And again, if you have a good mindset, you'll just be able to move off it. But to your point, people would rather, and outside the Million Maker, let's get to a real tournament here. It's nicer when it is like a 50, 30, 25, 20, 15, 15, 10, 10, whatever. And then that's your start. And then 5 for 10th place. It's like 50K to first, 5,000 for 10th. Back to my poker analogy. It's like if you make the final table at the main event, the World Series of Poker, everyone's a millionaire now. Everyone made $1 million. Let's call it that. I know people are backed and staked, but $1 million for your prize. Up to this $1 million, 12 million or whatever for first. Still a nice balanced structure. Like it's good.
And that's why I play in that 153 max, because I went through all of the different tournaments and I looked at the payout structure. Like, hey, if I come 5th in this tournament, am I going to get paid? Is it going to be worth my while to play this every single week and maybe have a 3rd and have a 7th? Will I make enough money to come out profitable in the end? And I decided that yes, I do, because it's pretty flat, where 70% of the money doesn't go to first place. There's a $9. I assume the slant is going to be back this year. That's one of the better payout tournaments for some of the larger ones. It's $9 per entry. It's double your money if you cash. They pay fewer people, but it's generally pretty flat down the line.
Can I say one thing about that, though?
Sure.
This is a thing, too, that, again, you won't catch on to always, but I'll give the tip out here. That's one of the sharper tournaments on all of
Because people like the
DraftKings,
payouts.
Because people like the structure. So the best players in the world are playing their 150 in that because they feel good about their lineups. They're confident. So it actually, the cash line in that is much higher. In some
Really?
cases, 4 to 5
See,
points.
this is why I talked to
average
you.
higher than it is in some of the other tournaments, even though they're both paying out similar and everything like that, because people are jamming that, knowing that it feels better to get. They're not really going. Everyone's like, oh, this tournament, in F1, I can win first and lose all my money. Well, no, you probably came first, 8th, 9th, 12th. Like you had a pool of lineups that got you there, or you did just play one and you still made money. In this tournament, it's the same way. You can make back a bunch of your money even on the worst weeks because you're in that way. But you are, for newer players, just to note, you're playing against a lot better players and the average cash line is higher.
I suppose my point is take a look at the payouts before you enter. So I talked about looking at the entry fee, obviously, how many lineups that you can play in. Is it a 150? Is it a $20? Is it a single entry? Is it a 3 max? I really like the 3 maxes because I feel like it juices up the prize pool a little bit. Some people have 3 lineups to year 1, but I try to play them like a single entry. I don't think I'm that far behind the 8 ball on that.
I agree.
When I'm doing it. And then take a look at the payout structure. Is it something that you like? Is it something that you don't need to win, that you could sustain yourself and make money in? Because there's a couple of the single entries, like the $33 single entry, where again, it's just all of the money is up top. If you don't come first,
Yeah, it's
you're
a
screwed.
tough spot. Rule of thumb, I would say, is can you afford the buy-in? Make sure of that. Can you max it? Meaning if it's a single entry, clearly, can you just putting one in? If it's a 3 max, can you put 3 in it to make sure you're keeping up with everybody else instead of putting 3 in to a tournament where everyone else has 150 and you're already at a significant advantage? And then a rule of thumb on the contest structure would be look at the total prize pool. It's a GPP, guaranteed prize pool. If it's $100,000 guaranteed prize pool, look for hopefully 10, but up to 20, I think is still fair. 10 to 20% for first. So 10 grand to 20 grand being the top prize. That's a fair number off the total prize pool. Then jump down to 10th place and try and get 10% of first. If it's 20 grand of first, hope for 2 grand or as close to that as possible for 10th. If it's 10 grand, hope for 1,000 for 10th, but make sure that's sort of a rule of thumb you can just look at across the board. And then we know it's going to pay out 20 to 25%, probably double your money for a min cash. So once you're in that position, that's just a cheat code to go look at it, to find some good tournaments for yourself that you can be in. And then the smaller the field, the better, because then you're going up against less people, the more opportunity or higher odds you would have of actually getting to the top of something like that.
We spoke about ownership a few times. And I don't want to get into the idea of, well, this guy is highly owned, you can't use him. But you always say it's not necessarily who you play, but how you play them. And I think that is a good starting point to talk about lineup construction with higher owned guys. Let's say Justin Jefferson's in a great spot and he's, for whatever reason, cheaper than he normally is. He's behind the very top end. Because I think when we talked about the first few weeks last year, when Jefferson was the highest priced guy on every single slate, you're like, even if he goes off, you probably don't even need him.
That's when they get extremely pricey. So
Yeah.
that would be a prime example of when a very expensive wide receiver is going off, and just a quick example, we'll give two of them, one in either way. The Greg Dortch example we gave earlier, I'd want him all the way stacked up. I don't want him as the one-off, because if he goes off, it's and for a ceiling score, it's very likely his quarterback came along with him. So even if you just went with quarterback and Greg Dortch because he can run them in, all that stuff, like that's an example you could do. But Tyreek is a better example for this. You probably don't even need Tyreek. There was many weeks in the past of days of DFS where Devontae Adams went off for 30, still didn't show up on a winning Millie Maker lineup. For who's the other guy? Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp. Everyone would play him at $9,900. He would get you your 28 or 30, but it still wasn't needed because a guy for $3,000 less also got 25, as did another one. And they stacked with more common things, and they allowed you to fit more expensive running backs you needed that you couldn't fit with him. But with Tyreek Hill, if I'm playing him at 9,800, I want him. I don't really want him as a one-off. I want to play him with Tua, because if he gets the 50 that's required to break this slate, or 40, whatever that number ends up being, it's all relative to the slate at hand. I want it with Tua, because Tua is probably a huge part of that. It's not likely that Tyreek took Tua end-arounds for 90 yards to the house. Just not. So I would say that's an example where I want to see that. It's the same when people do secondary stacks, which is another topic. We talk a ton about these on Friday. But if it's the Dolphins versus the Bucks, let's just say, and it's, Mike Evans is 7,900 and Tyreek Hill is 9,800, while that's a good secondary stack and they could have a nice back and forth game, if they go back and forth and go off and they're talking shit and it ends up being those two,
you want the rest of it.
One of their quarterbacks is there. Maybe you can't afford Tua and you need to drop down to Tampa. Maybe you don't. However you want to set it up. I'm just saying, when people look at that stuff, I consider that as well. I probably want like a 6K running back against a $3,500 tight end as a secondary stack. Not forcing this, just saying, at least with that, I could see where the running back could score 2 touchdowns, really be needed at 6,500 or whatever. And because they're down, that tight end just starts racking up those 10-yard catches over the middle, gets you 8 for 80, and maybe they get in the box, but if they don't, 8 for 80 is a pretty good score on 3,500 or 2,500, whatever their price is at tight end.
Well, let's circle back to, let's say Jefferson is, this is not his price. Let's say $7,100, and he's projected to be 24% owned, and he's going up against the worst defense. It was just a severe mispricing, but now he's going to be the highest owned guy on the slate. I'll still play him.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
There's so many ways he's one guy of your 9.
It's just, you don't want to make your lineup the same lineup as everyone else with Justin Jefferson. That's kind of the point that I'm getting at. If you want to play these highly owned guys, the move isn't just, they're too highly owned. Now, like I said, with like the $3,400 receiver and they're 20% owned, I just won't play that guy. Yeah, I see no reason to do it, because that's not a lock. Nothing's a lock, but that's most definitely not a lock.
100%. The difference there is you're just making a decision on a player at that point. Like I said, it's not just about the picks and plays, but it's about the overall process of it. In that process, I'm thinking, okay, Justin Jefferson, he's insane. You watch receiver on Netflix, the guy's a beast. You go see what he's done on the field. You know what his price is too low. The ownership doesn't really matter at that point. I can get 50% of it if I want. I can get 40% of it. I can get leverage on him. I can play him differently. There's lots of different ways that I can do it. But I can also see a world where he gets me 27 points is needed, but I don't need his quarterback, because it's totally different. It's just, instead, he can get you 3 catches for 180 and a touchdown and have a pretty good day rolling for you. And that doesn't mean anything. It's helpful to the quarterback, but there's probably still 10 quarterbacks that beat his. So he kind of just fits the mold. That's why I gave the examples of the low guy, Dortch, and the high guy, Hill. It matters that those little nuances matter as well.
So where does ownership also crop up? Like, if we're thinking about, well, let's just talk about stacks now. So can you explain what a stack is to people who may not know in football? Yeah,
so if you're just putting a quarterback with a pass catcher, and it could be with a running back, some people stack that, but it's less likely and less common. But if you go Tyreek Hill with Tua, if you go Jamar Chase with Joe Burrow, you've stacked your lineup up. If you double stack it, you're adding somebody else into that. Again, I'm saying pass catcher, it can be anybody. Running back, tight end, wide receiver is what you're allowed to stack on there. So it would be, if you go Jamar Chase, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and one of the tight ends or one of the other wide receivers, you've double stacked it. And then if you want to do a game stack, it's some form of quarterback with a pass catcher, and then at least one person from the other side, often called a run back or a bring back on the other side.
So, and you can do this, it felt like 5 years ago, the move would, like, when people really first started like adopting stacking, like sharp players were doing it, then it trickled down to the less sharp players like myself. Like, I'll just use Matt Ryan and Julio Jones. There's my stack, and then I'll just fill out the rest of my lineup. I feel like we've really evolved from that, where it almost went too far one way. Like, I saw a Millie Maker, I think won once. It was like a 7-person stack of a game.
Yeah, you can overstacking is more common. Triple stacking. So playing, I'm just using an example from last year, I would assume, but like, Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Godwin, and Otton. So you've so you've got 3 guys with Mayfield. He throws 4 or 5 touchdowns. It's mostly to those guys.
That's the lineup that I should have used to get into King of the Beach.
It could have been.
I had that Baker Houston game pegged, and I think I have to use Bryce Young.
Yeah, it's the way it goes. But I just mean that's an example where now sort of people have taken it's the meta game of the DFS game evolving, where it's like, well, hey, everyone is playing Baker Mayfield with one of his receivers. I think it's with 2 that would get me there. But then also too, Pat, if you're in a smaller field, doesn't matter the stakes, higher stakes, whatever, smaller stakes. But if you're in a smaller field, it's like we always talk about it like a parlay, right? You have a 9-person lineup you need to fill out. Well, if you just say it's going to be those 4 guys, Baker and the 3 pass catchers, a running back from the other side that gets this stack flowing, scores an early touchdown, then they're coming back the other way, they score again. You put another receiver on the other side. Well, now you've got 6 guys covered out of 1 game. If that game goes off, you vault way ahead. In a 100-man field, you're probably the only person crazy enough to do that. But you're taking your shot. If this happens, you probably run away with this thing and move on.
It's like playing a same game parlay. You'd be like, hey, if Baker's gonna, I have Baker in for 300 yards plus. Well, if Baker throws for over 300 yards, Mike Evans is gonna have 279 of them.
Sometimes.
Maybe sometimes.
You're right, though.
Let's say like Maxey has 150.
Yeah.
Well, there's now 150 plus to go around 2 other people. And if he's going to throw that much, that means he's passing the entire time, which means that people on the other team presumably are scoring unless he's done all of his damage in the first 2 quarters. That's always one that I really like. It's like, well, I can't play this guy this week. They're going to be up by too many points and they're going to get benched. Well, if they get to too many points, that's probably a good thing for your lineup.
And maybe just that's another part of the involvement of the other stuff that we talked about, but a lot of people have started leaving run backs or bring backs off. You don't necessarily need it. Like I've seen great lineups that I think are very sharp, where it's like a quarterback, 2 pass catchers, or a quarterback with the running back, with 1 pass catcher, and then even pumping the defense into it, no run back.
Just an onslaught.
And the idea is it's an onslaught. Like this team's going off this week. Baker to Evans. White's going to score early on too and probably be throughout. He might even get and then the game starts. It's a check down to White to the house for 40. And those 2 started off big.
And then the rest of the game is just defense facing pass attempts
and Evans
like
got
just
some
bombs
catches
down
on
the
3rd
field.
yards and gets 1 touchdown that makes it so that the blowout ensues. And then there you go. It's over. And then White gets even more running yards. And now everybody sort of got there, or at least more than enough. But everyone that stacked Baker was with one of Evans, Godwin, Otton, something like that. And then someone from the other side. And the other side just never shows up, never comes through.
You talked about secondary stacks, and I feel like that's really where I got a lot of my wins last year. And shout out Trey McBride for being on him early. And I think the only reason I got there with him is because there was someone on Stanford, I think it was McCaffrey actually, who I wanted to fit in. McBride was the only guy to fit in on the other side. It was like him or Dortch, and everyone was on Dortch. Like, screw it, I'll play McBride.
Yeah.
And those are the 2 that I want going back and forth with each other. And he was the one who ended up getting there. But I like those. Just 1 player on one side, 1 player on another side. They're very rarely like the most expensive, like you said. It's not Tyreek Hill and Mike Evans. It's usually T. Higgins and I don't know.
It's just,
Gus Edwards, something like that.
Yeah, like I said, it's a cheap running. It's usually like a mid-tier running back and a tight end, but in this case, it works as well. For your example, McCaffrey can be that team's whole offense. He can break the slate in his own right. He's a running back that gets guaranteed touches, catches, etc. He's going to rack up 30 to 40, possibly. That's fine because you're committing to him at a running back slot. It doesn't matter if you stack him. Now you can afford other stacks. Again, what is the week bringing you? If there's tons of good cheap stacks out there, then it's fine. You're going to be able to fit McCaffrey and still get different elsewhere. But the Trey McBride thing is like 2 ways. Instead of going on Greg Dortch, you're moving to McBride. McBride is at a 1Z position. You can play multiple tight ends if you play tight end in the flex. It's not common for people to do that in the large field tournaments, but it is possible with the way pricing works. But just to note, you do have to play 1 tight end, and most lineups are playing only 1 tight end. Typically 80% or more are playing only 1 tight end. So in that case, you're just filling it out on the comeback, but you're still doing a secondary stack while moving off of a cheap chalk play that is allowing most people to get CMC. You're having to go different somewhere else now.
And that makes my lineup unique, despite using guys that other people have.
You play, it's how you play them. Exactly. You're able to get CMC, but most people are using Dortch to get CMC. And cash game lineups are all starting. Our original build on the show on Fridays is probably starting. We know people are playing CMC, therefore they're playing Dortch. We know in our golf shows, people are playing Scotty Scheffler, That's why Grazerman's chalk this week. It's the same idea, but now you can find ways to build against it while still holding on to the piece that you want at the top, in this case, CMC.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do on every single Friday show. Like, basically, I'll go on Run the Sims, I'll hit optimize, and it'll spit out the highest lineup. It's generally uncorrelated in that way, and most people will correlate their lineups with a stack or a bring back, and we'll massage it a little bit to try to come up with the lineup that everyone kind of like, we call it the shitter guy lineup. I mean, that's the optimizer lineup. Like, when people sit down and just click on names on their phone Sunday morning when they're taking a shit, who do they land on?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, we can work off of that. Like, oh, we can swap this guy and this guy out for these two guys that project out exactly the same, but are 1/4 the ownership.
100%. It's the best show for that because it is the key is we really are saying we don't know what the final puzzle is on Sunday. Let's hope we get towards that. But we know kind of by Friday what the puzzle's starting to look like for most people. What puzzle are most people making? Think about being in the room and we're all making the puzzles. We almost can start to see that because of ownership where we're like, oh, guy over there is building that one. That guy's building a similar puzzle. Okay, Pat, how do we build ours differently to be able to take down those puzzles?
It's funny. I play in this like $20 contest every single week with a few guys that I know and a few of their friends. It has like 40 people in it or something like that. I think I won it 7 times last year.
Right.
And I think I came in last 7 times.
Yep, it would make sense because when their stuff is smashing.
When their stuff smashes, I lose. When it doesn't smash,
it's a battle of 1v1s and 2v2s. But that's the other take I would say for sure is I bet you the weeks you're losing or coming last, those guys are all tripping out because it's really close. Oh, he needs this guy. He needs that. It's because it's down to 1v1s that they're fighting for a top spot with so much similar stuff that went right. And people say, isn't that every week? All the guys that do good show up in the top lineup. It's not necessarily true because the weeks you're winning or
I'm
you're
winning by like
involved,
30.
You can be up by like 30 because you have 2-3 guys that nobody in the field has that have all separated on need to have scores or have to have type scores.
And usually how I do that, it starts with my stack. I mean, we talk about it on the show. We identify what the popular stacks are going to be. I just generally don't take a
Pat tries to sell me on a bunch of crazy stacks. If you
I
tune
do.
in for the show, it's incredible stuff. But yes, he does sometimes get it to work. And there's been times Bryce Young, he
got
really
it?
gets it to work. And I'm like, damn, I missed that one. But it works. And that's the key.
What's funny about that Bryce Young stack that won me, I think it won me 10 grand in just the 150, and it got me the qualifier to King of the Beach. He had like 11 points that week.
Yeah.
But having him allowed me access to everyone else in that game who went mental.
And you never know when that's going to happen.
Like
That's key.
Chuba Hubbard had like 35 points in that game. Thielen, just through receptions alone, I think got like 25. Hill had 40, and Mostert scored 4 touchdowns.
What was the full stack again? Do you remember?
It was Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard, and Thielen with Tyreek and Mostert.
Right. So it was a game stack of 5 guys.
Yeah.
So what we talked about earlier, Pat ran the quarterback with the running back and 1 pass catcher, a pass catcher and a running back from the other side. 2 of the higher price was, again, how do you get, not who you play, it's how you play him. How do you get access to an expensive Tyreek Hill like that? Well, Bryce Young, Chuba Hubbard already. Secondly, and I think this is, again, just more, not advanced, but probably intermediate step to say, is you talk about him only getting you 11, but one of the key factors I do as well and think about in my head is how much is the stack worth? Meaning, even if you do only end up getting the 11 from Bryce Young, you still have to factor in that Hubbard and Thielen could really make up for that. It's the total price of your stack and how many points you end up getting from it. And then also how it allowed you to get, you're not getting Tua into that lineup without sacrificing huge.
And the reason that I ended up getting on that lineup, because the most popular stack that week was Tua, Hill, and Waddle. They were just onslaughting that. I was like, well, I like this game. There's a projected ton of points here. How do I get different access to those guys? I was like, well, you said Hill could go off without Tua because he's Tyreek Hill and score me enough points to get there. But like, how else does Miami score points? Well, just give it to Mostert.
And most people wouldn't play Chuba Hubbard because if they were playing the Tua side of the stack, they're thinking, even though he did get a bunch of checkdowns and all that stuff in these games, I'm talking about where they would think, I don't know if their running back's going to be as involved. I'll just play Thielen. But in the end, you needed
both.
No Waddle. You did need Thielen. You did need Tyreek. You did need Chuba. And that's what happened when you played Bryce Young. He allowed all of that to happen. Not who you play, it's how you play them. That's what led to it in the results-oriented portion. That's what happened. But building it, your thought process was, how do I get it all into one? That's how you package it up.
And going back to Bryce Young and the actual King of the Beach, very bad idea.
Yeah, you went back to the well, but you went with your gut and what got you there.
It's true.
So you have to go down. That's part of the game as well. Go down with your stuff.
But I very rarely play like expensive stacks, like expensive quarterback stacks outside of Like I'll throw a few like Lamar, and when I say skinny stacks at this point, basically Lamar with a pass catcher and move on. Just because I know that Lamar, sometimes you'll need those guys to break the slate for you. And I think that it's going to be very interesting this year with Jaden Daniels, with Caleb Williams, even Anthony Richardson. Like, how do you deploy these guys in stacks? Because even if you say, hey, you can just play them by themselves because they can rush for enough touchdowns, it still feels like you want someone to come along for the ride with them to really hit that optimal peak game.
Phony Tony is back, baby. I'm excited. Can't wait for this. So I love that theory of it. I think it's been, something I've talked about forever. I joke all the time about never Mahomes, except for in Showdown, because Showdown is a game where, you're going to need, that's totally different. It's one game, one slate, everything that you're playing. On the main slate, though, it's challenging because Mahomes is expensive. His receivers are typically expensive, but in this case, it was like Rashee Rice moved up over time. Kelsey, and everyone will say, oh, but you could play Rashee Rice. You could often have and not need Mahomes last year. You could have Pacheco from that offense or different ways to play it. You didn't need, we talked about earlier, Kelsey very much at the start of the season. Showdown slates, you needed him. He shows up in prime time, and then late in the season in the playoffs, he really showed out. But just to note it, it's not because I think Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL. He's incredible. But it's set up where his wide receiver room is so tough to get right. We call it wide receiver roulette. So if you skinny stack them, you play one guy, it's Rice. I get it, but then you've spent a lot of money on both those guys this season. And do they really break it? And is it needed? Or does Rashee Rice just get you 6 for 150 and a touchdown, which doesn't mean that Patrick Mahomes met his salary at components at 75 or 7,800. So that's a prime example. Even with Lamar, Jalen Hurts, those guys, oftentimes we're playing them either by themselves, we call it naked, just them, and saying hopefully they're going to run 2 in, get 100 on the ground, whatever it might be, 2 or 3 tush pushes for Hurts or whatever, or we're just skinny stacking them, which you gave the example on already, where you're saying, okay, Hurts, A.J. Brown, or Hurts, Devonta Smith, something like that.
Or Goddard.
Goddard, something like that.
Or Barkley.
You can get away with it that way. And again, then I'm balancing the act. If it's, you just gave me a great one and it works for Lamar too. Lamar Andrews, Goddard with Hurts. The reason is I still have to fill that tight end slot. Tight end's tough. It's hard to get right. It's its own roulette wheel. Why not put it with the tight end that's playing with my guy? Secondly, the pricing is not really adjusted as well at tight end as some of the other positions. You can get sometimes a wide receiver 2 or 3, maybe even a wide receiver 1 for a team in some cases where it's like that's basically what they are at tight end. Mark Andrews for the Ravens. But he's not priced. He can't get up to 9K like a wide receiver 1 on another team. Not saying he's as good as them, but even still, his price might be in check at $5,000 or $5,400. That now, again, compare your whole stack. Lamar plus him at their prices average to much less overall.
Once again, go hit the description. Use code MAYO at Underdog Fantasy for a deposit bonus of up to $1,000 and play in the $25,000 Pick'em League that I'm running right now. Just go fill out that Google form and get yourself that account. And you wouldn't want to win $5,000 for the end of the year for something that you're probably going to want to do anyway. And I'm going to be doing shows on Underdog Pick'em all year long. Let's finish this off with some rules of thumb that people kind of need to know. What hops out to you immediately?
We talked a lot about stacking.
Stacking.
Right?
So
stack. It's hard to get it right if you're just trying to play all the one-offs or all the projected plays that make sense. I would look through the projected plays that make sense, forget the ownership for a second, and try and figure out, is there versions of that, like you talked about that Miami game that week, where you can flip it or make it different or find something within it to make it happen. If you don't like that game, or you don't like those projections, that's fine. Move on to what you do want to build, but definitely be stacking in some way, shape, or form. That's the key cog in the wheel right out of the gate.
The first thing that I always try to do is both identify the game total, the team totals that they're projected to score, more points, more fantasy points. That's what I hear. And when in doubt, play teams that are playing indoors.
Yeah, the weather becomes a factor later as the season
but
goes on.
Even earlier on in the season, because it doesn't play as much of a factor, but you could get a game that has rain out of nowhere. You get a game that's a bit colder than maybe you think that it is, or there's wind. Just like inside is going to be optimal conditions, and it's faster. It benefits the offense.
Yeah, and I keep that in mind for a couple of other things we talked about on the show, where it's like the secondary stacks, even if it's a 44 total, but it's in Atlanta, in the Dome, and it's Atlanta with somebody, like you could play, if it's Pittsburgh versus Atlanta, let's say, you could play a running back for Pittsburgh versus Kyle Pitts, for example, and have a nice cheap secondary stack that's still indoors. It still is 44 points going up on the board, but you're also not paying as much for that secondary stack. So I weigh that in a little bit.
George Pickens, Darnell Mooney. there's your secondary stack right there for
You know
all
what
the
I mean?
savings.
There's all kinds of ways you can go, but it fits our mold of like we're not overpaying for the secondary stack where if they really ceiling out at a wide receiver position, you probably need their quarterback. We're going to get lower ownership because most people are avoiding it because it's a lower total, but we also have something in our favor in the case you brought up a good point. It's in a dome, it's indoors, it makes sense. So there's that. And then also I would say better quarterbacks is another thing to look at. When if you're doing like a 1v1 on your last guy and you're thinking about it and you're factoring ownership, you're factoring in project, oh, it's so tough for me. They're only 0.5 apart. How do I know? Who's playing indoors? Who has a better quarterback throwing to them? What's that setup look like? Try and compare some of those factors in, but usually the better quarterback is able to get his receiver the ball.
Yeah, who has Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball? Who does Bo Nix have throwing him the ball?
Sometimes it's as simple as that, man. Like it honestly is. And I know you may not want to have your whoever it is, like last season, Justin Watson. You're like, but he might have a blow up game. He did actually have a couple of big games.
Remember when he scored the first touchdown, but then it didn't count as first touchdown? It was devastating.
I've seen him make a lot of things happen, but I also saw him win a Millie Maker for a Ship It Nation member as the captain slot in Showdown. So just a note, Justin Watson could be your guy one time. It is possible.
Yeah, and I beyond that, I would say play the obvious chalk running back at a low price and just rework your lineup around that. Don't play the obvious chalk tight end or obvious chalk quarterback or obvious chalk wide receiver at a cheap price.
Yeah, I agree.
Just the easy fade or the obvious chalk defense. Just don't play them.
Chalk defense was good when we talked through, I think, for sure. A lot of things that we threw out there that we will extrapolate on a ton when we get to actually doing the show.
And we'll build the lineups. People will be able to see them as we're building.
The real content at hand. Like here's week one. Here's what people are doing already. They've had the pricing forever, which is an awesome one to see because that'll give you an idea of what we're doing throughout the season. But it's one that the pricing's been out for a really long time that we're going to be breaking down to start things off.
Do you want to talk about Showdown or should I save that for Justin and I? Because basically what you want to do is subscribe to runthesims.com and use the Showdown simulator.
Yeah, it's a whole nother animal. I think it's definitely another show, but it's, there's lots of good content out there. We have a segment in our course. Justin knows what's going on with it.
You'll have the show on Mayo Media Network for free as well.
Yep, every Thursday Night Football Showdown show is going to be same with Hoop, myself, Title. We broke it all down last year. Same people you know and expect will be back this year. We'll be back Thursday Night Football on Mayo Media Network. And then the other day, Monday, we'll be on the Ship It Nation YouTube station.
Do you have any like quick tips for Showdown? Like just things to basically what should you avoid? Like, hey, I'm just here. Like I missed, like I put in a bet on the game. I want to throw $20 in the Millionaire Maker to go play it. What do I do?
I would go off the board. It's just me. Like I think, again, you're just really trying to heavily for me to avoid duplicates. And I think everyone should play that way because there's just so much money up top and at stake. I know some people just want to throw their $20 in and try and turn it into 1,000, and that'd be amazing. It is. That would be amazing ROI.
Then play a different contest than the Millionaire Maker.
But it's like I would just, if I'm playing to just throw $20 into Showdown, I would play to win. And again, it doesn't mean go completely off the board and look for that 0.1% wide receiver that nobody's going to have. It could be as simple as
Justin Watson is captain.
There's 4 captains that everybody's on, and they're all high priced. I'm going to throw a cheap guy up top there, leave a little bit of money on the table, and then play it out from there with all the expensive guys in the flex. Little ways that you can go, again, looking at what is the field doing? How do I go up against that? We cover all that and more at Ship It Nation as well in the slate plan that I do personally, looking for these angles of attack.
And I would say that if you're going to play a lineup or two, that before you pick anyone in your Showdown lineup, I mean, I would consult Run the Sims, and I'd probably run the Sims on the contest Sims to see how many duplicate lineups are actually going in. Like that's the next level of people who are entering 150 lineups. If you're not doing that, think about how the game is going to go. What do you think the final score of this game is going to be? And then work your lineup around that. Like how do the Chiefs get to 26 points? Yeah. And if they win 26-20, well, all of a sudden, like, how do the Ravens get to 20 points? Like, what team is more likely to have some, like, weirdo score for them?
You can adjust Run the Sims to get that.
Yeah,
and
of course.
You can game flow. You can change the
score,
running back percentages of what their share is going to be and all that. So, I mean, having tools for Showdown is critical. Run the Sims, like you said. But the other thing is just the I know better stuff. Like, you don't know. How many times, if you're playing DFS Showdown, I mean, you're into the weeds now. Trust me. You've been around some football stuff, I think, for at least a minute. How many times have you seen a survivor pool shut down on a huge underdog win because everyone thought there was just no way this team could lose? That's what I'm talking about. When you're just throwing your one lineup in, why not go for the opposite side of the game or for a different game flow or type than people are thinking about? Because nobody knows. And it never seems to go the way that you expect. And even if it does, then there's different plays within that. Maybe put 2 lineups in and balance it again. Bankroll management, contest selection. Do one where you can afford 2 lineups, play one to what you think is going to happen, but be different within that. play the other lineup as like, if it doesn't go that way, how does it happen? Don't just onslaught the other side and say the Raiders are going to beat the Chiefs and you're going to need 5 guys from the Raiders and 1 Chief. Very unlikely. But you could still build it. Maybe you build a 3-3, 3 guys from the Raiders, 3 guys from the Chiefs, because you think they actually keep it a little bit more competitive, maybe go up early, force some back and forth, while everybody else is just building 5-1 Chiefs lineup with 5 Chiefs, 1 Raider.
The real move is don't invest your money into Showdown. Invest your money into second half Showdown.
Oh, gosh.
Because we still have the sim tools and the lineup builders for that. And it is the least covered market, because obviously you have like 20 minutes to go enter, whatever it might be, especially for some of these big first games, playoff games, Thanksgiving games, whatever it might be. Some of these are really juiced up prize pools, and everyone plays basically the same lineup in it. If you just get slightly different, I think Sky won 5 of them last year.
Yeah.
Just by going to Run the Sims, hitting generate, and be like, oh yeah, you just adjust the score. Like, here's what the score is. Here's what I think the score and game flow is going to be like in the second half. It's like, oh, well, the Chiefs are up by 30. That means the Raiders are going to pass every down. And now how does this affect everything? And I'll build my lineup that way. And your lineup is just so much different. And it's easy to map out because you actually have a sense of what's going on in the game now too. You know what the score currently is.
And people are usually playing what has already happened in the game. And just
Exactly.
sticking with it. But I will say, now we're ending the show. Remember back to the start of the show, know your plan, know your goals, have your thing mapped out like I talked about. Map out your season. If second half Showdown is making its way into your arsenal, and it sounds like it should for the money you can make with it, then remember about those buy-ins as well when you're planning out for the year. Don't just say, got $100 to play Sunday main slate. If you are going to want to get involved in Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, there's early slates, afternoon slates, second half Showdown. We just talked about all these different things. Flash drafts, whatever you're doing, have your money set aside for those. Don't keep depositing, adding more, all of that. Have a plan in place before you go out and get started.
So what you should mainly do is take your deposit right now, go to Underdog Fantasy, use code Mayo, get your deposit bonus of up to $1,000, free $1,000 on your first time deposit. So I'd go do that. Then I'd enter the season long pick'em pool where you could win another $5,000 just by playing a minimum of $180 worth of entries. That is really the move. That is how you capitalize and sustain a bankroll.
And get to be in the game every week.
Yes.
You're in the game. You know you're in the game. You can't mess it up, really. I mean, unless you go crazy, because I tilt off or something like that. But for real, you can play every week with a plan in place, much like if you are in a one and done for golf, a survivor pool for football, whatever. You've bought in, you're there. Now you just have to put it in each week and actually play it. But I think that's kind of the key. Set a reminder. Build it in. You've got a game every week.
Yeah, and you don't even actually, for the season-long contest, you don't even actually have to play every single week. You just have to play 180 entries, or 100. You have to make 180 picks for the course of the season. That could be 2, 5.
Which fits our mold of what we talked about earlier. If you feel you've got an edge one week, you feel like
Then
this is the
hammer it.
week I really love this week, then hammer your picks in there because you're racking them up. And like Pat said, win percentage, not volume. Someone might play 1,000 to make it happen. Someone might play the 180 exact to make it happen and just hold the line and say, well, I'm at such a good win percentage. I'm just going to see what happens here. There's game theory to it in that sense. But if you feel a week that you're feeling good about your picks, get them in.
And that's a great way to have like higher rollers compete against the smaller time players who just don't feel the need to invest that much money. And I think it brings everyone together. So please support this pool. And that way it can be even bigger for next year. I mean, 25 grand is a lot of money, but what if we got that up to like 75 grand for next year?
You've never done this before with one and dones and such, where you've built it over time and got it bigger. So, hey, let's get it going. But you have done it, obviously, and that's what's awesome about this. So support it, hop in, let's get it bigger, make it happen.
ShipItNation.com, code Mayo will get you 10% off, and you get the college football and NFL package all wrapped into one. And we still have the partnership between Ship It and Run the Sims for the Showdown product, too.
That's right. And if you get in today, get in right now, whatever, I know it's only a week out, but you actually get all access leading up. So you can check out the site. You can start taking the NFL 4-hour DFS course where you can just skip to whatever segments you want to check out. You can go learn more about the other stuff. You can see the tools that we offer, and you can get in the Discord, which is the key, obviously being surrounded by the community of all the like-minded individuals that are paying as well. It's no free rollers or anything like that. Everyone in there cares about the success of others, trying to make it happen but for themselves, but you're looking to skip over some of the mistakes others have made and learned from.
So ShipItNation.com, code Mayo, RunTheSims.com, code Mayo, both for 10% off. Get your content and your tools, and just tools alone, completely customizable for every single slate over at RunTheSims.com. If you subscribe, rate, and review 5 stars to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast on Apple or Spotify within the next 10 days, you are in a draw to win $500 cash. So I'd recommend that you go do that. In the meantime, smash a like to the episode, sub to Mayo Media Network. Tambo and I will be here every Friday walking through DraftKings lineups with you, and I'll have my underdog pick'em plays for the week coming out on Friday evenings as well, along with a full injury report. So every single day on Mayo Media Network, you are getting yourself some hot NFL content. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
That Mayo experience! Experience!